Ever wonder why some people seem to keep making the same mistakes over and over? Why they never learn, never grow, and never seem to get any wiser? Today, we're diving deep into something the ancient Stoics understood perfectly: the true nature of stupidity. And let me tell you, it's not what you think. The Stoics had a completely different take on what makes someone truly foolish, and their insights are absolutely mind-blowing. Get ready, because what you're about to learn might make you question everything you thought you knew about intelligence and stupidity. In this video, we're going to explore 9 shocking signs of stupidity that the ancient Stoics identified. And trust me, these aren't your typical indicators. You'll discover why some of the most successful people might actually be the most foolish, why education doesn't equal wisdom, and how you might be displaying these signs without even realizing it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what the Stoics meant when they said that the highest form of ignorance is rejecting wisdom itself. The first thing we need to understand is that the Stoic concept of stupidity is radically different from our modern understanding. Today, we tend to equate stupidity with low IQ or poor academic performance. But the Stoics, they saw something much deeper and more insidious. They understood that true stupidity isn't about intelligence. It's about wisdom, or rather the lack of it. In the Stoic worldview, stupidity isn't about what you know or don't know. It's about your relationship with knowledge itself. They believe that the truly stupid person isn't the one who lacks information, but the one who refuses to acknowledge their own ignorance. This is a crucial distinction that completely transforms how we understand foolishness. The ancient Stoics observed that stupidity often masquerades as confidence. In fact, they noticed that the most foolish people are frequently the most certain about their beliefs. This is what modern psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect. But the Stoics identified this pattern thousands of years ago. Intelligence, according to the Stoics, isn't just about processing information quickly or scoring well on tests. It's about the ability to learn from experience, adapt our views in light of new evidence, and most importantly, recognize the limits of our own understanding. This is why someone can be academically brilliant, yet fundamentally foolish. What makes this perspective so revolutionary is that it puts the focus on behavior and choices rather than innate ability. The Stoics believe that stupidity is fundamentally a choice, not something we're born with, but something we actively practice through our decisions and attitudes. The implications of this understanding are profound. It means that intelligence isn't fixed. It's not something you either have or don't have. Instead, it's a practice, a way of engaging with the world that we can choose to cultivate or neglect. This view challenges our modern tendency to label people as simply smart or stupid. Instead, the Stoics saw these qualities as fluid states that we move between based on our choices and attitudes. Anyone can act foolishly, just as anyone can act wisely. These insights formed the foundation for how the Stoics identified truly foolish behavior. Their observations were so accurate that they remain remarkably relevant today, even in our technologically advanced world. What's particularly fascinating is how the Stoics linked stupidity to character rather than capability. They understood that foolishness often has more to do with our moral choices than our mental capacities. This brings us to the 9 specific signs they identified, markers that reveal not just intellectual limitations, but fundamental flaws in how we approach knowledge, wisdom, and life itself. Sign number 1, inability to change one's mind. The first and most glaring sign of stupidity, according to the Stoics, is an absolute refusal to change one's mind when presented with new evidence. This isn't about normal resistance to change. It's about a deep-seated, almost pathological inability to admit when we might be wrong. The Stoics observed that truly foolish people tend to treat their opinions as part of their identity. When faced with contradictory evidence, they don't just disagree. They often become hostile or defensive, as if their very self is under attack. This rigidity of thinking manifests in various ways. You might notice someone using the same failed approaches repeatedly, expecting different results. They might cling to outdated beliefs despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. They might even pride themselves on their consistency, not realizing that true wisdom often requires evolution of thought. The root of this behavior lies in a fundamental misunderstanding of strength. While the foolish person sees changing their mind as weakness, the Stoics understood that the ability to revise our views in light of new evidence is actually a sign of tremendous intellectual and emotional strength. What makes this sign particularly dangerous is how it compounds over time. Each refusal to change becomes a brick in a wall of ignorance, making future growth even more difficult. The mind becomes like a muscle that has forgotten how to flex. This inflexibility often extends beyond mere opinions to encompass entire worldviews. The truly foolish person becomes incapable of seeing things from different perspectives, trapped in an increasingly narrow view of reality. The Stoics noted that this trait often appears alongside a peculiar form of selective memory. These individuals tend to remember only information that confirms their existing beliefs, while dismissing or forgetting anything that challenges them. This pattern creates a self-reinforcing cycle. The more someone refuses to change their mind, the more their thinking becomes entrenched, and the harder it becomes to break free from this pattern of foolishness. What's particularly tragic about this sign is that it often masquerades as principle or strength of character. The foolish person mistakes their stubbornness for integrity, never realizing that true integrity requires the courage to change when we're wrong. Sign number 2, obsession with appearances over substance. The second sign revolves around a preoccupation with how things look rather than how they actually are. The Stoics identified this as a particularly insidious form of stupidity because it often comes disguised as sophistication or success. This manifests in the constant pursuit of status symbols, the obsession with maintaining appearances, and the relentless focus on what others think. The truly foolish person, in the Stoic view, lives entirely in the realm of appearances, never touching the substance of life. What makes this sign especially relevant today is how social media has amplified our ability to craft perfect-looking lives while potentially neglecting the real work of personal growth and authentic living. The Stoics would view our current influencer culture as a mass expression of this form of foolishness. The danger here lies in how this obsession with appearances leads to a disconnection from reality. When we're more concerned with how something looks than what it actually is, we lose our ability to make sound judgments and decisions. This preoccupation with appearances often leads to what the Stoics would call empty success, achievements that look impressive but bring no real satisfaction or growth. It's the pursuit of a life that photographs well but feels hollow. The truly foolish person caught in this trap becomes increasingly unable to distinguish between authentic value and mere show. They might have all the trappings of success while being fundamentally unsuccessful at the things that matter most in life. What's particularly tragic about this sign is how it prevents real learning and growth. When we're obsessed with maintaining appearances, we can't admit our mistakes or weaknesses, the very things we need to acknowledge in order to improve. This sign often manifests in the inability to appreciate simple pleasures or find satisfaction in private achievements. Everything must be displayed, shared, and validated by others to have value. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often leads to a kind of spiritual poverty, a state where external richness masks internal emptiness. Sign number 3, emotional reactivity. The third sign of stupidity, according to the Stoics, is the inability to control one's emotional reactions. This isn't about not feeling emotions. It's about being completely at their mercy. The foolish person, in this context, is like a leaf in the wind, blown about by every emotional current. They react without reflection, respond without reason, and often regret their actions once the emotional storm has passed. What makes this sign particularly dangerous is how it compounds other problems. Emotional reactivity leads to poor decisions, damaged relationships, and missed opportunities. Yet the foolish person never learns from these consequences. The Stoics observed that this kind of emotional slavery often comes with a peculiar form of self-deception. The reactive person often prides themselves on being passionate or authentic, not realizing that true authenticity requires the ability to choose our responses. This pattern creates a self-reinforcing cycle where each emotional outburst justifies the next one. The foolish person begins to see their lack of control as a fixed personality trait rather than a habit that can be changed. The truly reactive person loses their ability to see situations clearly. Every challenge becomes a crisis, every disagreement becomes a battle, and every setback becomes a catastrophe. What's particularly interesting about this sign is how it often appears alongside high intelligence in other areas. Someone might be brilliant in their field, yet completely unable to manage their emotional responses. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often manifests as a kind of emotional addiction. The foolish person becomes hooked on the drama and intensity of their emotional reactions, making it even harder to break free from this pattern. The cost of this emotional reactivity extends far beyond the individual. It affects relationships, work performance, and overall life satisfaction, yet the truly foolish person remains blind to these consequences. Sign number 4. Resistance to learning. The fourth sign identified by the Stoics is a subtle but profound resistance to genuine learning. This isn't about formal education, it's about the fundamental attitude toward knowledge and understanding. What makes this sign particularly insidious is that it often coexists with a superficial interest in learning. The foolish person might collect degrees or certificates, but they never truly integrate new knowledge into their understanding of the world. The Stoics observed that this resistance often manifests as a tendency to speak rather than listen, to teach rather than learn, to answer rather than question. The truly foolish person is always the expert, never the student. This pattern reveals itself in the inability to engage with ideas that challenge our existing beliefs. The foolish person seeks not to understand, but to confirm what they already think they know. What's particularly dangerous about this sign is how it creates a false sense of wisdom. The more someone resists true learning, the more they convince themselves that they already know enough. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a peculiar form of arrogance. The truly foolish person believes they have nothing left to learn, while the wise person remains eternally aware of their ignorance. This resistance to learning manifests in various subtle ways, dismissing new ideas without consideration, refusing to engage with different perspectives, or being unable to admit when we don't know something. The cost of this resistance is cumulative. Each opportunity for learning that we reject becomes a brick in the wall of our ignorance, making future growth increasingly difficult. This sign often appears alongside a selective approach to knowledge, accepting only what confirms our existing beliefs while rejecting anything that might challenge them. The truly foolish person, caught in this pattern, becomes increasingly isolated in their understanding, cut off from the richness of different perspectives and new ideas. Sign number 5. Lack of self-reflection. The fifth sign of stupidity, according to the Stoics, is perhaps one of the most fundamental: the inability or unwillingness to engage in genuine self-reflection. This isn't about casual self-awareness. It's about the deep, often uncomfortable work of truly examining our thoughts, actions, and patterns. What makes this sign particularly dangerous is how it operates beneath the surface. The foolish person might appear successful, competent, even wise on the surface, but they never truly examine the foundations of their actions and beliefs. The Stoics observed that this lack of self-reflection often manifests as a constant outward focus. These individuals are experts at analyzing others' mistakes and flaws, but remain blind to their own patterns of behavior. This blindness creates a peculiar form of stagnation. Without self-reflection, there can be no true growth or development. The foolish person repeats the same patterns, makes the same mistakes, and never understands why their life seems stuck in recurring cycles. The cost of this lack of self-reflection extends far beyond the individual. It affects relationships, career progression, and personal development. Yet the truly foolish person remains unaware of these impacts. What's particularly fascinating about this sign is how it often appears alongside high achievement in external matters. Someone might be incredibly successful in their career while remaining completely unaware of their internal landscape. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a fear of silence and solitude, the very conditions necessary for genuine self-reflection. The foolish person fills every moment with noise and activity, avoiding any opportunity for deeper contemplation. This avoidance of self-reflection often manifests as a kind of perpetual busyness. The foolish person stays constantly occupied, not realizing that this very busyness is a form of escape from self-knowledge. The truly foolish person, in this context, becomes increasingly disconnected from their own inner world. They might know everything about their field of expertise while remaining strangers to themselves. This sign often appears alongside a peculiar form of self-deception. The person without self-reflection creates elaborate justifications for their actions, never questioning the underlying motivations or patterns. Sign number 6, inability to see patterns. The sixth sign of stupidity identified by the Stoics is the failure to recognize and learn from patterns, both in life and in personal behavior. This isn't just about noticing repetition, it's about understanding the deeper connections and cycles that govern our experiences. What makes this sign particularly problematic is its compounding nature. Each failure to recognize patterns leads to repeated mistakes, creating a cycle of unconscious repetition that can span years or even decades. The Stoics observed that this inability often manifests as a kind of historical blindness. The foolish person treats each experience as entirely new and unique, failing to see how current situations echo past one. This pattern blindness extends beyond personal experience to broader life lessons. The truly foolish person fails to see how their choices connect to consequences, how their actions create predictable reactions, and how their behavior shapes their reality. What's particularly dangerous about this sign is how it prevents learning from experience. Without the ability to see patterns, each mistake becomes isolated, each failure disconnected, and each success random. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a peculiar kind of optimism, the belief that this time will be different, without any fundamental change in approach or understanding. This inability to see patterns often manifests in relationships, career choices, and personal habits. The foolish person repeats the same relationship dynamics, makes the same career mistakes, and falls into the same destructive habits without recognizing the recurring nature of these patterns. The cost of this blindness is cumulative. Each failure to recognize patterns adds another layer of confusion and randomness to life, making it increasingly difficult to make wise choices or predict outcomes. What's particularly fascinating about this sign is how it often coexists with intelligence in other areas. Someone might be brilliant at recognizing patterns in their professional field while remaining completely blind to patterns in their personal life. The truly foolish person, caught in this blindness, lives in a world that seems chaotic and unpredictable, never realizing that many of life's patterns are both recognizable and manageable. Sign number 7. Disregard for consequences. The seventh sign of stupidity, according to the Stoics, is a fundamental inability or unwillingness to consider the consequences of actions. This isn't just about impulsiveness, it's about a deeper failure to understand the interconnected nature of reality. What makes this sign particularly destructive is its ripple effect. The foolish person's disregard for consequences doesn't just affect them, it creates waves of impact that touch everyone around them. The Stoics observed that this disregard often manifests as a kind of temporal myopia, an inability to see beyond the immediate moment. The foolish person lives entirely in the present, not out of mindfulness, but out of a failure to connect present actions to future outcomes. This short-sightedness creates a peculiar form of chaos in life. Without consideration of consequences, decisions become purely reactive, driven by immediate desires or fears rather than wisdom and foresight. What's particularly dangerous about this sign is how it often masquerades as spontaneity or freedom. The foolish person might pride themselves on living in the moment while actually displaying a profound form of irresponsibility. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a selective memory, an ability to forget or minimize the negative outcomes of past actions while maintaining the same destructive patterns. This disregard for consequences often manifests in both small and large decisions, from daily habits to life-changing choices. The foolish person makes decisions as if each exists in isolation, never considering the cumulative impact of their choices. The cost of this disregard extends far beyond the individual. Relationships suffer, opportunities are lost, and potential is wasted. Yet the truly foolish person never connects these outcomes to their earlier choices. What's particularly fascinating about this sign is how it often appears alongside high intelligence in other areas. Someone might be brilliant at predicting market trends or scientific outcomes while remaining completely blind to the consequences of their personal actions. The truly foolish person, caught in this pattern, creates a life of perpetual surprise at outcomes that were entirely predictable to more thoughtful observers. Sign number 8. Pride in ignorance. The 8th sign of stupidity identified by the Stoics is perhaps one of the most paradoxical, taking pride in one's own ignorance. This isn't just about not knowing things. It's about the active celebration of not knowing, often disguised as pragmatism or street smarts. What makes this sign particularly insidious is how it creates a barrier to all future learning. When someone takes pride in their ignorance, they transform their limitations into a kind of perverse virtue. The Stoics observed that this pride often manifests as a dismissal of knowledge itself. The foolish person might mock education, despise theory, or reject any information that seems too complicated or intellectual. This attitude creates a self-reinforcing cycle of ignorance. The more someone takes pride in what they don't know, the more they close themselves off from opportunities to learn and grow. What's particularly dangerous about this sign is how it often spreads to others. Pride in ignorance can become a cultural value, creating communities where lack of knowledge is celebrated and wisdom is viewed with suspicion. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a peculiar kind of arrogance, the belief that one's ignorance is somehow more authentic or real than others' knowledge. This pride in ignorance often manifests as a rejection of expertise, a distrust of established knowledge, and a preference for simplistic explanations over nuanced understanding. The cost of this pride is enormous. It limits opportunities, narrows perspectives, and creates a kind of voluntary imprisonment in a smaller, simpler world than reality actually presents. What's particularly fascinating about this sign is how it often coexists with expertise in specific areas. Someone might be highly skilled in their field while taking pride in their ignorance of unnecessary knowledge. The truly foolish person, caught in this pattern, becomes increasingly isolated in their ignorance, mistaking their limitations for strength. Sign number 9. Fear of wisdom. The 9th and final sign of stupidity, according to the Stoics, is perhaps the most profound. A deep-seated fear of true wisdom. This isn't just about avoiding knowledge. It's about an existential dread of the transformative power of genuine understanding. What makes this sign particularly tragic is how it prevents all other forms of growth. The foolish person, afraid of wisdom, becomes trapped in a self-imposed cage of comfortable illusion. The Stoics observed that this fear often manifests as a kind of intellectual agoraphobia, a terror of open spaces of thought, of questions without easy answers, of truths that might shake our comfortable certainties. This fear creates a peculiar form of mental paralysis. The truly foolish person becomes incapable of engaging with any idea that might challenge their existing worldview or require significant personal change. What's particularly dangerous about this sign is how it often disguises itself as practicality or common sense. The foolish person might reject wisdom as impractical or overthinking, never realizing that their rejection stems from fear rather than reason. The Stoics noted that this form of stupidity often comes with a kind of defensive cynicism, a tendency to mock or dismiss anything that threatens to expand our understanding of life. This fear of wisdom often manifests as an attraction to oversimplified solutions, black and white thinking, and absolute certainties. The foolish person seeks comfort in simplicity rather than truth in complexity. The cost of this fear extends far beyond the individual. It creates a resistance to progress, a rejection of new ideas, and a perpetuation of old problems that require new wisdom to solve. What's particularly fascinating about this sign is how it often appears alongside other forms of courage. Someone might be physically brave while remaining terrified of the kind of wisdom that might require them to change. The truly foolish person, caught in this fear, lives in an increasingly narrow world, never realizing that the wisdom they fear is actually the key to their freedom. Now that we understand these 9 signs of stupidity, the question becomes, how do we transcend them? The Stoics weren't interested in merely identifying foolishness. They wanted to cure it, and their solution was both simple and profound. The first step in transcending foolishness is recognizing that we all display these signs to some degree. True wisdom begins with the humbling recognition of our own foolishness. The Stoics taught that the cure for stupidity isn't intelligence, it's wisdom. And wisdom begins with the courage to face ourselves honestly, to acknowledge our limitations, and to embrace the discomfort of growth. This transformation requires a fundamental shift in how we view knowledge and understanding. Instead of seeing them as achievements to be attained, we must view them as practices to be cultivated daily. The path forward involves developing what the Stoics called philosophical awareness, a constant mindfulness of our thoughts, actions, and their consequences. This isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming conscious. Each of the 9 signs of stupidity can become a checkpoint for self-examination. Instead of using them to judge others, we can use them as mirrors to better understand ourselves. The Stoics emphasized that transcending foolishness isn't a destination, but a journey. Each day presents new opportunities to choose wisdom over foolishness, consciousness over reactivity, growth over stagnation. Remember, the opposite of stupidity isn't intelligence, it's wisdom. And wisdom is available to all who have the courage to pursue it. If you've recognized any of these signs in yourself, don't despair, celebrate. Recognition is the first step toward transformation. Start today by choosing one area where you can begin practicing greater wisdom. Remember to like and subscribe for more insights from ancient wisdom, and share this video with someone who might benefit from these timeless truths. Until next time, stay curious, stay humble, and keep growing in wisdom.